Carol.
Hello, how are you?
I am fine. How are you this wonderful Friday?
I'm great. And I'm glad that this turned out to be a Zoom meeting because all of a sudden I was like, I don't know if I should be over at food prep meeting her or where.
No, I actually worked last night. I transitioned back to night shift. So my first days off now, I don't come because I get done at 6 in the morning. And yes, I work six
Wow.
in the evening to 6 in the morning. So I'll be there tomorrow though. So, but yeah, it was easier to do it today than be out there, playing around the cats. It's not a good thing when you've not had a whole lot of sleep.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for doing this. I had heard through our workplace group that you had had your own big cat close call. And so if you could share with people that, how you're involved in law enforcement and what that was about, I think that would be so cool.
Well, I've been involved in law enforcement since, wow, I've been involved over 26 years now. I've worked for two departments throughout my career, and this happened very early in my career. I was still working for Seminole County. I'd only been employed there on the road for probably about 3, maybe 4 years. So you talk a very long time ago. And the call for service that I actually was going to was in regards to a bear cub in a tree over a pool enclosure. Not
Only in
uncommon.
Florida, right?
Yeah, not uncommon for the area. A relatively well-to-do neighborhood, but it is surrounded by woods, and it was black bear country. Not something that I would have. It's not something that was not an uncommon call for service. So when I get to the home, I'm met by the homeowner, and she starts to walk me out to her pool enclosure. And as we're passing the threshold of the enclosure, she says, "Oh, by the way, I have a big cat out on my porch." And today, I couldn't tell you today what type of cat, but I can tell you, knowing our cage enclosures, when I stepped onto the pool enclosure, to the right, kind of where most people would have like an outdoor kitchen or a seating area, was this very large enclosed area with a very heavy cage steel. Like I said, I'm pretty sure it's like the steel we use now on what I've learned here. But the entire pool enclosure was also fortified. And so she says, "Oh, by the way, yes, I have a big cat over here." And I could hear him moving around in the small part of the enclosure. And she says, "I'm concerned because this bear cub is in the tree over, and I'm afraid if he falls through my enclosure, that my cat is going to go crazy and try to escape his nighttime enclosure and go after the cub." So with that, the hair on the back of my neck kind of stood up. And I'm like, okay, well, hopefully the bear cub won't fall through your enclosure, because I'm not real sure what we would do if it did and how you would handle that. And I just, my hair stood on end, and I just actually wanted to get away from the pool enclosure.
And somewhere there's a mama bear in all of this that we just haven't seen or heard about.
Yeah, we never did see mama, but that's more or less what I told the homeowner. I said, "Listen," I said, "he's up there quite content to lay on that perch and across that limb." I said, "Mama's around someplace, so he is going to eventually come down, and they're pretty good. They don't generally fall out of trees unless something else has happened." I said, "There's not a whole lot I can do for you." And walked away from that house remembering the address, one, because if I ever had to go back for any other call, I wanted to be prepared. And I just remember thinking to myself, if I ever got the call because this cat has escaped, oh my gosh, the only thing I'm going to be able to do is have to destroy this cat, because there's no other option for me. And I just made sure to tell all of my zone partners and my supervisors, I'm like, in case you go to this house, be prepared. So, and apparently what she told me is that the enclosure he was in was his night enclosure, but he had access during the day to the entire pool enclosure. And I was horrified.
Wow.
Absolutely horrified.
And how much of your training as a police officer goes into dealing with captive owned wild cats?
None of my training has ever done that. I will say back in the day through the police academies, very early on, they used to teach us how to trap and catch alligators because we do know how, we do deal with them. And I have had encounters where I've had to assist in helping catch an alligator. But they're pretty big, they're pretty docile for the most part if you do it right. And once you sit on them, they don't move. But they do back in the day, Fish and Game came out and they would train officers how to properly catch them and so they could be relocated. Wild cats, big cats, I've never had training for that. Not anything anybody ever thought about until obviously what happened last year, and with that attack that was in over in Tampa area with that leopard in that backyard. Most people really don't pay attention to the fact that people have large exotic cats.
And
So
do you guys, as police officers, have access to dart guns and tranquilizers and all of that so that if you did come across an escaped big cat that you could sedate it?
no, ma'am. I would, if I came across a big cat and it was aggressive, I would have to destroy it. I do not have access to any of those things at all. And I don't believe that there's an agency locally that does.
I don't think there's anywhere that does.
Yes, ma'am.
It's not been our experience. And I was asking you that for a reason, because it's one of the things I hear most from people. There's an escape, there's a cat running at large, a police officer is then called onto the scene because that's usually who gets called first.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
then they have to kill the cat because they can't let a child be killed at a bus stop by some roaming tiger or something. And then the public gets all bent out of shape and saying, well, you should have tranquilized the cat. Well, first of all, you don't get any training, you don't get any supplies, you don't even have a DEA license to be able to have those kinds of drugs. So it's not law enforcement's problem. The problem is the people who have these animals in the first place.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. The tools on my belt are meant for people, so to speak, and small animals. But I'm not going to get within. I have a taser, which I only have a 15-foot distance. I'm not getting within 15 feet. So the only other options would be my firearm, and that's what would have to happen.
And there's not a cat here who couldn't leap 15 feet in the blink of an eye.
Yes, ma'am. That is very true. I have seen that with our cats at Big Cat.
Are you aware, or have you had conversations with other people in your field that have had big cat experiences?
Nobody with my obvious current agency. And even when I brought that back in the early part of my career, when I brought that to the attention of my partners then, they were all shocked to hear that there was an exotic big cat in somebody's backyard. And as far as I know, I have never personally encountered anybody else that has ever had an encounter like I did.
Wow, well, I'm surprised. I would have thought with it being as prevalent as it is here in Florida, there'd be a lot more of it.
Not in the smaller towns that I've worked in, and because Seminole County is not that big in itself. Seminole County was a very small county, so to speak. In Polk County, I know we have some sanctuaries around the area, but as far as personal ownership, I know I've heard and seen on news clips that people have had the smaller ones, kind of like the savannas, things like that. But I haven't personally encountered any more since that first time.
And for people who aren't aware, how long have you been here at Big Cat Rescue, and tell them what you do here?
I started in March of 2018 and have worked my way through the levels. I am currently a senior keeper.
So you take care of lions and tigers, the bigger cats.
Yes, ma'am, I do.
And knowing what you know about those cats, because you had to work around the little cats for like 2 years before you could work around the bigger cats.
Yes, ma'am.
Knowing the power of those big cats and seeing what you've seen firsthand, do you think that there is any reason why people should have these in their pool cages or their backyards?
No, ma'am. I don't see why anybody should have the smaller ones, because they're just as dangerous. They're small, but they're just as dangerous. But no, I see no benefit and no reason why somebody should own a big cat in their backyard at all.
I think those smaller cats you're talking about, like bobcats and servals and caracals, we tend to think, well, they're not 500 pounds, so they can't kill me. But man, they can reach out and hurt you in a hurry.
Yes, ma'am. My bucket has been swatted more than once by several of the smaller cats, and some of those cats have claws. So yes, I would not want to have one of those in my house. I'll stick to my domestic house cats.
Well, thank you so much for coming on and talking about your experience and letting people know that when law enforcement is called onto the scene, that you guys really are working with the very few tools that you have to deal with a situation that shouldn't have to exist in the first place. So thank you for putting yourself in harm's way. And I'm really excited about the fact that the Big Cat Public Safety Act is endorsed by the National Sheriff's Association, the Animal Control Associations, everybody who has to do the kind of work that you do and be on the front line. They do not want that front line to include tigers. So we're really thankful that they've gotten on board to help us pass this bill.
Yes, ma'am. I have enough to worry about without something with 4 legs and claws.
Thank you again.
Not a problem. Have a great afternoon, Carol.
You too.
Bye-bye.